play Minecraft in a minute. We have some serious Minecraft.
Welcome to 33 Tangents, a roundtable discussion covering a wide variety of topics from digital analytics to working remotely to current happenings in business and technology. Your hosts, Jason Thompson, John Moran, Jen Coons, and myself, Jim Driscoll, all live in different areas of the world but work together in the same company. Our regular day-to-day conversations often go off in various directions, and the goal of this podcast is to share our ideas and find new ways to engage with others.
So the audio sounds okay, because
Yep.
the
For you,
mic
yeah.
is the mic is definitely in a different placement. So before, I had the mic coming in from the side and it was like right here. Now it's behind my monitors and up out of the way a little bit, but it's okay.
No,
It's
it,
hard
it,
to
it picks it up. Trust
it's
me.
hard
if
to
the-
compare, but there is more like I don't know if it's coming from Jim. Mute for a second.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming from your room, Jason. It sounds like there's like a fan in the room or
Oh,
something.
there is. Wow, it's super sensitive. It's not in the
See?
room.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. No, like there have been a couple times where like the baby's crying upstairs.
The
and
air
you don't necessarily-
conditioning.
Yeah. The mic has actually picked up the
It's
baby
more
crying
like-
upstairs on my side.
Yeah. There's more like humming in the room, so regardless, but
Weird. Well,
Yeah.
the only thing that's on in the room is the air conditioning. I did switch. I've gone back at least for today to the wireless headsets. I've been doing the wired. I don't know if that's gonna make a difference. By the way, back in the day when I was super bored at one of my jobs, and everyone said this is a cool thing to be bored, and it wasn't. I ran a radio station, and I can't remember the software that I used. I'm gonna have to like Google it. But there was a software where you could run a server on your computer, and you could queue it up like a radio station. And I went and found a bunch of old like 1940s, 50s radio ads, and I actually stitched those into the music. And I do rotations, so I do holiday music, I do other stuff, and there were people at the company that would tune into my radio station, and I took it pretty seriously, and it was pretty fun. I made a little some promos, so that's what
cool.
happens when you get bored at your job and you're trying to find things to do. You run radio stations. Anyway, maybe it was
Nice.
Shoutcast I was using. I can't remember,
that's
but it was
cool.
fun. It was fun. Yeah. So we've gotten Hilab back on the podcast after like a 9-month hiatus or
Yeah.
something.
Just
It's
came to
been a while.
check what you guys are up to.
It's been a minute, as the kids say. So
Finally get invited. I'm trying to figure out what's the common theme of the topic that I do get invited for.
Well, early on it was multivariate testing, just because like early on, just trying to focus
Yeah.
on people's areas of expertise. But you actually gave me a great segue into what I want to talk about today, because I want to focus, HR policy to a degree, but want to focus on time off. We're in the middle of the summer at this point. Lots of people taking vacations, and I don't necessarily. One of the things I want to talk about next week is why people in America aren't taking vacation. I've actually got some statistics on that. That's going to be next week's episode. Why
they should
aren't
come
they
work
taking...
at 33 Sticks. Because it's
Right.
tradition that if you start at 33 Sticks, you instantly go on a month-long vacation.
Yes.
Yeah, as soon as you start. And then you come back for like 2 weeks and we do kickoffs and all kinds of intros and then you go off to another vacation. That's the cycle. So
But what I want to talk about today is unlimited time off. And I'm going to ask the question, is unlimited time off as a perk of employment actually unlimited? Because if you look at it over the last several years, maybe even up to 10 years at this point, there's been a trend with many tech companies where for the company to offer unlimited time off instead of going with you get 2 weeks of vacation and 14 PTO days for 7 sick days, 2 weeks PTO, whatever. However, they kind of split it out. But this is your days and specific uses for whatever. Instead of going that like, hey, get unlimited time off, take it off as you need it. But is it actually true, or is it just a gimmick that company's using? And again, next week we'll talk about why people aren't taking vacation, because there's significant data that show that people aren't taking nearly the amount of vacation. But, our company's actually offering it as a benefit, that knowing that employees won't use it. Because if you think about it this way, if you get 4 weeks paid time off and you can't roll that over, you're going to use it. Whereas if you get unlimited time off, are people actually taking 4 or 5 weeks of time off that they would take if there was like a specific number. And then from your side, how do you ensure employees actually take their time off and that they just don't keep grinding away?
I wish I had access to, and I'm gonna Google it while we're talking. But there's almost a fight back against this on LinkedIn from a few of the people that have been bubbling up in my feed, and they've been the claim is that unlimited time off is actually a really bad policy. It's bad for employees.
What's that argument?
That's what I'm gonna say. I'm trying to go.
I think
back.
I know what it is, because when we were going to put this in place, I've considered the fact that most places, whatever they give you, let's say they give you the first few years like 2 weeks. If and when you leave the company and you have them accumulated, the company like has to give it to you in the form of some sort of payoff, some sort of equivalent money. And I think that's presumably part of the downside, that like by saying unlimited, you're really not committing to anything, depending on how you make that offer, because they're thinking, oh well, if I leave, then I don't have anything accumulated. But for me to think that way and say, okay, I'm going to base my entire policy to accommodate when people want to leave the company, that makes less sense to me. Meaning, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and so I found one of the articles on LinkedIn, and I think it somewhat aligns with what Jim was mentioning, but this is just one of many that I've seen over the past 6 to 9 months, and it's been really, really hard for me not to engage with these, because maybe on to some degree they're right. So while and I don't know that we've gone out and then damn it, I can't talk this morning, and necessarily touted it as
we can cuss
being,
on this podcast.
Yeah, we got an E rating, I think, after Jim Gordon was on, because he dropped the F-bomb like 3 times.
Oh.
No, I'm
Yeah, it's just as long as we don't do it explicitly.
Okay.
Yeah. So the argument is that it's a scam. That companies are using it to look cool and progressive, and that we're this really neat place to work, but really it's a guise to get rid of a benefit that the employees get, which, as Jim mentioned, is the accrual of time off as an asset, which is a liability on the company's books that has to be paid out.
That's what I meant.
And the argument is that it's this wolf in sheep's clothing, and this is this amazing thing, but no one takes advantage of it. It's a bait and switch, and when you get in there, it's not really what you think. You think, oh, it's one of the best places to work. I get to have unlimited time off. This is so awesome. And then the argument or the quote that this one article says, but if you think you're going to be able to take a month off to go backpacking across Europe, you're in for a rude awakening, which is a good kind of
point.
Segue in that. Bryant is backpacking across southern Utah for like 3 weeks, so maybe it's not Europe, but again, the point is that it doesn't really happen. That the time off gets put under more and greater scrutiny, and people are taking less and less time off, and so while they're getting less vacation, they're also getting less value, because that asset that they are accruing has now been been taken away. And lots and lots of people are making this argument on LinkedIn.
It makes sense. I can see how it would be hard for people in this scenario as employees to ask for it. So even though clearly the company has said, it's unlimited and you could take a significant amount of time, and even if they truly mean it, it's still hard for an employee to say, I really want to take 3 weeks all at once. Or 4 weeks all at once, like your example. So I can see how that could be difficult. I think, yeah, it does put the onus on the company to kind of say, okay, because they're not our employees are not technically accruing the time, and it's not easy to ask. Maybe we put something in place to make sure that they remember that it's okay. That that somehow during that time they're not going to get penalized when they get back.
Yeah, and that's the argument that that these people are making, and one of their anecdotal data points is go look at the reviews on Glassdoor.com, and specifically look at companies that are offering unlimited vacation, and you'll see that almost equitably across the board that companies that offer unlimited vacation actually equates to less and less time off, not more. And the argument is that companies are tightening it down. There's more scrutiny around it. While they're touting it as a benefit, it's actually not something that they're giving. And again, the counter argument is if you have a set vacation that you earn, you've earned that. And the argument is you don't need approval for it. This is my vacation. I earned it. I can take it. Whereas with unlimited, it's fuzzy and
you have to ask for it.
You have to ask for it. Maybe people aren't taking it because they feel I don't know. So I get the argument. And I actually can see that happening where companies use it and tout it, but they're really using it for their benefit and not employees. But I also think that it's a little unfair to paint that with such a broad brushstroke to say that unlimited time off doesn't work. Because I think it's working. I think it's working for us. Again, we may be an outlier, but it seems to work for the way that we've structured it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a company by company thing. But it seems to be a growing, I'm going to use the word fad at the moment. It's a fad to say, hey, we offer unlimited vacation time. And yeah, they paint this picture like, oh, you could just take off whenever. But that's not necessarily the case. Or they paint this picture that, yeah, you work really hard. You can take off 2 months toward the end of the year. Again, which isn't necessarily, accurate. At least that's what I feel, just kind of watching things as they go, and it seems to be a lot of times with the bigger and bigger companies. And I know I'm talking very broadly at the moment, but that's just kind of like the gut feeling I get when I see recruiters talking about, one of the benefits is unlimited vacation time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, especially in our industry, there's such a fight for talent, but I think it goes outward across many industries is that companies are really competing vigorously for top talent. And so everyone's pitching things like we have unlimited time off. We have a really good flexible work from home, work remote policy. We have all of these things, but that's easy to say, but it comes down to actual execution. For me, I've always thought of it as a balance. And Hila and I talked about this at the very beginning of, if we put these policies in place, what is to stop an employee from taking advantage of it? Because technically I could take 200 days off a year, right? Under that policy. Now, they probably wouldn't be working for the company very long because they're not getting done what needs to get done to justify the employment. So there's some kind of balance. And that's the way I've looked at it, is that if we create an environment, we want people to take advantages of the things that we put in place, but not to the extreme of actually taking advantage of the company where it hurts the company, where it could actually take away those benefits. And it's the same way we've looked at our billing model, to be honest. We've had the conversation of, well, if we go with this billing model, what's to stop clients from taking advantage of us? And technically, by the letter of the contract, they could absolutely take advantage of us. But there's trust in the relationship that we want this to be a long-term relationship. And if one side's going to take advantage of the other, there's going to be a breakup. And that's the same thing here, I think, with the employee relationship, is that sure, employees could take advantage, and sure, the company could take advantage of the employees, but if we're all interested in a long-term relationship, we're going to want to work together to find that balance where it works for all parties, so we don't end up in a breakup state.
Mm-hmm. So basically, what you're saying is, when it comes to the employee-employer relationship, it goes back to what we talked about before, and managing down to the lowest common denominator, and making sure that you have people where you don't necessarily have to do that, and we can all act like adults.
Yeah, that's the way that I look at it. And again, we're one data point and probably an outlier, but for us it has worked very well. And if it works for us, then I absolutely believe it can work for other companies. With that said, I fully get and understand the counter argument that companies are using it as a bait and switch to get employees in, and then they're using it more for their advantage than for the employees' advantage. In those cases, yeah, I mean that's crappy business practice. But that could be said of really any policy where it's positioned to do that. It needs to be a balance, and we're all big boys and girls, and we can work out a relationship that works best.
I'd like to also talk about another kind of difference between these two, another type of difference between the unlimited and the more specific accrual system, is that in an accrual system, people get time off that is different. People get different time off. So they may have negotiated something part of their package, or by seniority, or just, there's a certain onboarding period where you don't accrue, or whatever it is, right? Whereas unlimited makes it all equal. So that's kind of another component, the fact that if done right, the unlimited offer, if done right, and only if done right, it makes it so everybody's, treated like a regular human being with needs and wants, regardless of their situation within the company. And, family, kids, no kids, it doesn't matter. It's more about the policy, as opposed to more about, how you were able to negotiate at the beginning, or, what position you have in the company. And that's kind of a big difference, and there's a certain, I guess, comfort for some people knowing, oh, okay, I'm going to start with 2 weeks, and after 3 years, I'm going to get 4 weeks. And, there's a certain systematic thing that people are usually comfortable with. And I think it goes back again to the discomfort of having to ask for the time off. So, if you know exactly what you got, then it's easier to say, okay, I'm going to take it now. But if you don't, then it's very hard. And so while everyone is equal, so to speak, and everyone gets the same, some people are going to be more comfortable actually asking for it, because they know they deserve it and they should take it, and whatnot. And they also know how to manage the time off, so they don't come back to a mountain of backlog. Whereas other people are, hesitant. So I think that's a big component that kind of makes the dynamics different, for sure.
No, that's a really good point. It treats time off as something that everyone needs and deserves, on an equal level. Just because you're a VP doesn't mean you need more time off than someone else. And I like the fact that everyone has that equal opportunity. And and let's be honest, I think some of the numbers are skewed when you talk about those taking vacation, those that aren't on a regular PTO plan versus unlimited time off. Because the reality is just because you've earned it and it's vaulted away, the argument that the people are making against unlimited time off is that you don't need approval, and I think that's wrong. At least I've never worked in a company where I don't have to get approval for my time off, even under the regular PTO plan. Just because I've earned it doesn't mean that I can take it at any time. There's a understanding that I still
That's
have to
right.
seek approval from my boss to take that time off, and it's not guaranteed that just because I've banked it that I can use it whenever I want. I think that's a very faulty argument that these people are making, and they can come back and say, well, it's still yours, it's still a valuable asset to you, which is true, but let's also remember that companies are managing around that through forced shutdown. So it may be looked at as cool that, hey, our company shuts down for 2 weeks every July. They're not doing it for their employees. They're doing it to get the liability off their book for people that are scared to take vacations. And so, the numbers I think are skewed a bit where these people are saying, look at how much more vacation time these people are taking under a traditional PTO policy. I think you need to throw out all of those companies that are forcing shutdown because you're forcing employees to take time off. They're not saying we're going to pay you. They're saying we're going on shutdown, and if you want your regular paycheck to continue, you have to use your vacation days to ensure your paycheck continues to come through as expected. And so
That's
I
right.
think that skews the results, and it makes it look like people are taking vacation. So while technically they are, it's not on their terms. It's on the company terms. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves when we're having that conversation that if we're just looking at the numbers, it's not telling the pure story of what's actually happening there.
Yeah, I didn't even think of the forced shutdown aspect of it. Yeah, that's a really good one.
I mean, and again, that sounds great as well. And companies use that as a perk. We have a forced shutdown. We have a shutdown where you get half of July off. That's awesome. What they don't tell you is in the fine print, by the way, to cover that, you have to use your PTO.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, it's a very strategic and well thought out move from a company standpoint to burn all of those liabilities off their books. And that to me says that people aren't comfortable, even under a traditional policy, taking time off, which maybe leads to our discussion next week of, why is that happening? So I think there's a much bigger issue at play here than the model. It's not that normal PTO policies generate greater vacation time
Mm-hmm.
than unlimited. That's I think there's a different discussion there. I think for this discussion, it's more around how it's positioned by companies, and if you are offering something like this, what can you do? And maybe that's where we pivot this conversation. What
Mm-hmm.
can you do as a company to ensure that it actually is of value to your employees and not just something you say to look like a cool, trendy company?
Yeah, and that's actually a good point because where I wanted to go next is, Hila, you were saying, just as we were kind of dialing into this, right before you were having some conversations to get some information on how vacation is handled outside of the United States. So do you want to start with
Mm-hmm.
that?
Yeah, so my brother and his wife and his family, they live in Sweden for a long time now. And in Sweden, it's kind of interesting because it's there are characteristics of unlimited, but even the base accrual system, so to speak, is very much kind of very beneficial, right? So basically everybody gets 5 weeks off, everyone. And there's additional piece to it that you can take 3 weeks in a row. So no one's ever going to frown at you saying, okay, I'm taking, 3 weeks off all at once. And it's become, because it's offered to everyone, no matter what kind of job you're in, even if you work in a store where there's shifts and all kinds of things like that, it doesn't matter. You get 5 weeks off, and it became so common that obviously everybody knows that they're getting it, that people actually do take it because everybody takes it's common, and everybody knows, like, they're not going to be like, oh my god, I can't believe she left the job for in the middle of the summer or whatever. It's very common for everybody to do that. And so they've put other things in place to help it and to help get rid of like the issues that might come up. So for example, if you work in a store and two peers are trying to take their vacation at the same time, there's systems in place where the company is allowed to kind of suggest, okay, you're going to take it at the beginning of July and you're going to take it at the end of July, beginning August. And it's okay, there's like systems in place to have a conversation around it. There's also the concept of rollover. So it's definitely not the unlimited route, but everything else is facilitated really well where, you can kind of roll things over if you didn't take it. So I think the goal there is always to make sure that your year is balanced and you have enough time off. As far as sick days, those don't get counted at all. And the interesting thing is, it kind of reminded me of school, where if you're sick and you're kept at home, they're going to be like, okay, you were sick. They're going to trust it, right? But if it's more than 5 days, someone's going to ask, well, what's happening? What kind of sick? Like, why is it so long? What's going on? And it's okay because they know that, and they know that they're going to want to come back with something kind of saying, look, this is it, or here's a doctor's note or something like that. I need more time. But generally, it's more of a psychological thing that it's not just that you can take sick days whenever. It's that they trust you to take sick days because if you're sick, you're sick, right? And there's no kind of like, oh, let me save my sick days to attach to my vacation, because you already know that you have a significant amount of time for actual time off to enjoy with your family. The other part that I learned about is they definitely accommodate when you have a child, both for men and women collectively, and they offer the time off to be with your child as a bucket for both parents together to manage and decide how they're going to split it. So even clearly most people are going to work in two different places, but there's something in place that kind of says, okay, you have 480 days, in the next, the first 4 years of your child's life, and you can kind of split them or spread them around however you want between the two of you. And it makes it like a family decision of how they're going to do that. So I found that interesting. It, obviously begs to have the systems in place, but I think the characteristics of this kind of system are very they speak to like the state of the person and what is right for them. It's not just like a blanket time off and then you have to kind of figure out how you're going to attach it to your maternity leave so that you have extra and you use your vacations to stay with your child more and things like that. It's more of like, okay, these are separate things. We recognize that you do want to spend time with your child, and then you do want to take time off for vacations, and those are two separate things. So I think that kind of helps kind of think about how to close the gap in communication when you do offer something like unlimited, or you do offer something that's a lot more generous. How do you manage to make sure that people actually use that time and it's not just a gesture? How do you communicate that everyone is going to do it? You don't have to feel awkward about it, in that if you don't take it, the company is going to ask you, hey, what's happening? You haven't taken a vacation all year. What's going on? And that's kind of part of it for them. The employer will ask like, why at the end of the year you're kind of just bumping your hours or bumping your time instead of taking some time off for yourself. They don't want to have people kind of burnt out.
Yeah.
Anyways, that it was kind of interesting.
It is, and I think it kind of blends in. Kind of blends in so I'm gonna read a section of this LinkedIn article, and I'll actually link up this article in the post, or Jim will when he puts it together. I can send it to you so that you can read the full post. It's good because it encompasses a lot of the arguments that I've seen on LinkedIn over the past year for it. So I want to read this section of the post, and then I want both of you to respond. Hila, I want you to respond from a here's what we're doing as a company. To address the issues that are brought up in what I'm going to read, and then Jim, as I want you to take the employee perspective of this is how I've addressed it or experienced it. So this is all about the whole scrutiny of taking time off. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. You should be taking time off you need to be productive employee. We all should. Hey bud. Yeah, I'll play Minecraft in a minute. We have some serious Minecraft going on. Let me finish this and we'll play, okay? You want to come sit right here? Okay.
And I'm not going to edit that out, by the way.
When I was in a full-time position, I did take those days off. In fact, when I left, I had a significant amount accrued. Managers should be encouraging their staff to leave the office more, to relax, unwind, de-stress, ... However, if you so what you actually get is the fear of looming performance reviews, and the inevitable conversation about how much time off you took. In an unlimited vacation day system, you are less likely to be encouraged to take the time off. And here's the argument they lay out for that. Think about it. When you have a stack of regular vacation hours, your employer wants you to use them up. We talked about this being a liability and employers wanting to get that off their books. With an unlimited system, they pay you whether you're at work or not. Ergo, they want you always to be at work because when you're not there, they're not getting the benefit of that money. And that's where I would put an asterisk and say, wait a minute, I think there's huge value to encouraging people to be away from work and have flexibility. So anyway, I'm interested in kind of your takes from that. So again, the argument they're making is with PTO that you build up, it's just assumed you're going to take it off, and that's good for everybody. With unlimited, if you take time off, I'm paying you as an employer to take time off, and damn it, I'm upset because you should be in the office working. There's no value to me taking time off, which I think is an absolutely ridiculous argument. But Hila, from a company perspective, I want your response and how you've planned and addressed that. And Jim, I want your response and how you address it from an employee perspective.
I think it has to do with communication between the employer and the employee in any of those scenarios, right? So I know that even people that do get vacation have it very challenging sometimes to ask, and they say, okay, first of all, I can't ask for it all at once. Plus, I just asked for something, and I have to wait. There's all these hesitation because you still have to ask. You still, the assumption is that you don't have to ask because it's yours. It's like you could just take it, but that's not really the case anyways. You can't just take time off and disappear. And I would say that, at least from my experience, the communication is actually makes it better for us to offer unlimited, because in the process of asking and somebody asking and saying, hey, I do want to take, a couple of weeks off to do this and that in August, that process, because we have to talk about it and plan together, it forces the exercise of actually planning for it and saying, how are we going to make sure that it doesn't build up? How do we make sure that we can do things up front to cover for that time? How do we make sure that other team members can come in and help? Or, in our case, with some of the clients that you're typically interacting with. So that negative thing of having to ask because it's unlimited and you have to ask for it. It's not just yours, it's not a given. is actually something that has to be in place anyways. We're kind of pretending that the other way around, you could just take whatever you want and whenever you want. It's something that has to happen anyways, but here it happens a little bit more structured because you have to accommodate for that time, and you want it to be, you want to kind of articulate how much time and when, and it's not just a given, and then the process is a little bit more specific and more structured to help make sure that during that time off, things go really well. So, I would say it's 100% about the communication path.
And what have you done? Sorry, before Jim, before you jump in, what have you done to encourage employees to take advantage of it? Isn't the right word, but use that benefit that they have available to them.
I like to kind of use by example, and it's not to say that I take a lot of vacation, but I think that the example is to start kind of recognizing that, well, it's hard for me because we also have a very flexible schedule, right? And so for us, it begins with the flexibility of the schedule and the fact that, if my kids at school have some show in the morning, I'm going to go to that, and then I'm going to come back and take care of some things later on in the day. So it's going to be a different kind of day. And it spills over to taking time off because, it's the same thing, right? Like you want
It,
to encourage people by saying, look, it's your time. We
yeah,
trust you to manage your time. And it's hard. Not everyone can do that. Not everyone even that offers unlimited time off can do that. It's very hard. And I think that's that issue because
yeah,
it's not sincere in most cases. So it's really a
right.
challenge. So yeah.
No, it's an important note, and Jim, sorry, I'm going to let you jump in. It's an important point you bring up because I've worked in organizations under a traditional PTO policy where I've gone in and worked in the morning until lunch, and then I've taken the afternoon off, and I was forced to take a half a day of PTO to cover for that. So, we should be honest as well
That's
that the
right.
flexibility schedule also plays into that, and we haven't even mentioned that where it's there's no kind of policy per se. It's more just managing your day, and I don't take mini vacations at all, but I will take huge chunks of time off. Like, I've been in the habit of not working like the latter half of the day on Fridays. And you don't even have to think about, well, what's the PTO schedule for this? It's like we're grown up, to Jim's point, to manage our time, and the fact that we can be flexible in what's best for us. I'm not a vacation guy, but I like taking big chunks of time off here and there, and that works for me. Other people, it's an extended time off is better for their mental health, so they should be able to do it that way. Okay, I'm gonna shut up, Jim. Jump in.
Wait.
Okay,
So I
well,
wonder.
okay,
Wait,
go
but I
ahead.
wonder. I wonder if other companies that offer unlimited time off, it actually spills into like half days and things like that. I bet you there's
You know
restrictions, and
what?
so it's not fair
Let's
for us to say because we don't have restrictions and we don't work by the hour. So maybe we're not being fair. It's very difficult to put a structure
fair
into
enough. Fair
place.
enough.
Yeah,
Jim,
yeah.
let's get. What do you think about this, Hila? Ryan Sanders from Bamboo HR on the podcast, and to talk about that, because I think Bamboo
That would be
HR
great.
is a company that I really look up to, and I learned a lot from working under Ryan at Spark Networks. They're very much, let's do what's right for the employees. They offer paid vacations. If you follow their socials feed, they share a lot of what their employees do with their time off. And they have a very different model. They're a much bigger company than 33 Sticks. They have hourly employees in some cases. They have employees that have to be there on certain time periods to manage their support systems. I think he would be an interesting conversation to talk about how they manage it, because they seem, I don't know exactly what their policies are, but everything I see from the outside, they're very much flexibility and time off and management of schedule in a much different ecosystem than we have here. Okay, Jim, now it's your time. But we should get Ryan on. I think he would be a fun follow-up conversation.
Yeah, I just made a note of that, so I'll work with you
Agreed.
to reach out to him. So, I mean, there's a couple thoughts going through my head. Part of it is sometimes as an employee, you feel the pressure not to take vacation, regardless of the type of policy. And now, I mean, that's something I want to talk more about next week. But when it comes to the unlimited policy, as an employee, I've worked in a couple of different organizations where they've had unlimited time off, and at times it's felt like you felt guilty taking that time off, and you feel guilty, like, wow, this is, say, like, if I accrue everything together, this is like the fifth week I've taken off in the last 8 months, or I've taken a total of 5 weeks off, and this level of guilt comes in because there's no real accounting to it. Whereas if you did have the accrual, like I get up to 4 weeks a year, whether it's an accrued asset, because I've worked for one organization where you had a max of 4 weeks off or 20 days off, and then after your fifth year you got 25 days. But you got that right out of the gate at the start of the year, so it wasn't like an accrued asset where you got 6.7 hours of time off per paycheck. But since it was a use it or lose it policy, they're like, make sure you take this time off, make sure you schedule it throughout the year. So, and that's why it started to make me think, as I started seeing more and more recruiters out there using paid time off as a major selling point. I'm like, but when you get in there, the culture of the organization is work, 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 work. So even though you have unlimited time off, you're not, you're not actually using it. Maybe you're taking, say, 2 weeks off, whereas if they said, hey, you get 4 weeks a year, however you want to use it, it's not accrued asset, so if you leave, we don't have to pay you out. You're going to make sure to use that time. And I know I'm starting to ramble. I'm going back and forth. I'm trying to bring some of these thoughts together to actually make sense. And that's what I've noticed in general, talking to others where there's paid time off, but when you get in there, it's a culture of work, 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 work. So maybe you're not being directly told not to take time off, but just the culture and your feelings from peers, like, maybe I don't want to take time off because if I take too much time off, I'm seen as someone that is abusing the policy.
So what has been your experience here? Because I think we fit both of those scenarios. We have a culture of working incredibly hard, and we have an unlimited PTO policy.
I mean, I've definitely tried to use it and take time off. That being said, there's a feeling of guilt that comes in. Not gonna lie, just because, one, we are a small team, and it's a feeling of guilt. Like, oh man, like, I took 3.5 weeks off when the baby was born, and then summer's coming up and I want to take time off, and it's like, wow, okay, I might want to not necessarily take some time off, just because you start to feel guilty taking so much time off.
Yeah, and I think that applies to any policy, right? That, and I think it comes down to ensuring that you're in a safe environment, and from an employer perspective, having those open conversations with your team. Because again, I think the argument laid out in this article that I was quoting is absolutely wrong, and I'll reread the sentence where he says, with an unlimited system, they pay you whether you're at work or not, ergo they want you at work, because that's when you're not there, they're not getting the benefit of that money. And that's where I would disagree, is that, at least for a company like us where we're very long-term focused, we don't hire employees to say, how much can we get out of Jim in the next 6 to 12 months, because he's going to be gone after that, so we need to maximize his output during that time. We don't view it like that. We view it as a very, very long-term game, and in order to get there, you have to make decisions that maybe in the short term don't look financially profitable, but over the long term they do. And having happy, healthy, content employees that are balanced absolutely pays off in the long term. And
And I think that there's a level of give and take. You just made me think of that, because the other thing too is not just the time off, but to think about flexible work environments. The one thing everyone conjures in their mind when someone says, "Oh, I've got a flexible schedule, it's a flexible work environment." You think about as the employee, the default is everything I'm going to get. I can leave at 3 p.m. to go do this, or I could take. I'm not being checked for how long. Or did you take 45 minutes for lunch? No, you took 60 minutes, so you need to stay an extra 15 minutes. Like, you think I don't have to worry about that. I can go meet someone for lunch and have a nice long 2-hour lunch. That flexible time, but there's give and take. What that also means is there's times where you're getting up at 6 a.m. and logging on because, say, a client is launching something. And you have to remember that when, like, oh yeah, that's right, last Friday I left at 2:30 to go do something. I called it a week at 2:30. And again, I'm getting down to like specific numbers, but I'm just trying to
and this isn't a made up. This isn't a made up scenario. This is a Jim actually this happened scenario.
No,
right?
Jim actually feels bad for it. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I wrapped up about 3 last Friday. And then took the baby.
Well,
up
it's
to
a
the
Friday,
bit.
so yeah.
But no, it's like, and then that's some of the things. Like, I even talk to family, like, oh, that's so awesome. You can work from anywhere, and you can work whenever you want, kind of thing. I'm like, yeah, but there's give and take. There comes a time, like, I have a client in London. There's times I've dialed in at 3 a.m. to a conference call because there was a major meeting that they wanted me to be there, and the meeting started at 8 a.m. their time, and. I was up at 2 a.m. brewing my, several cups of coffee to join. But that being said, there's other times I'm cutting out at noon. There's a give and take. So then if you go back to the paid time off, the other thing you got to keep in mind is, there's give and take with it as well. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's not a complete one-to-one example like, a flexible schedule versus paid time off. But that is one thing that came to mind there is you definitely have to keep in mind give and take.
Yeah. So how do we wrap this up? I think, I think from a company standpoint, if you're using it as a recruiting tool, you absolutely should live up to your word. And so we just brought Brian on, has it been a month? I was teasing him the other day about, are you putting us to the test? Because I think he mentioned something. He's like, I'm still waiting for the bait and switch, which is unfortunate that people think that way, but that's the way that we've been conditioned because companies kind of put their best foot forward in the recruiting and kind of pitch all these things, but in reality, in the execution of things, it's not there. We had an amazing game room at Omniture, and hardly anybody used it. And as much as the executives said, hey, this is here for your benefit, there was always this belief of, if you're seen in the game room, you're not working, you're a slacker. And so companies use these things to pitch that we're such a cool company, but in the execution, no one takes advantage of all of these things. And again, take advantage maybe isn't the right word. Nobody uses these things. And so... I think if you're a company and you're using this as a positioning for your brand and this is how you do it, you should actually live up to it and do that. From an employee perspective, I think it's about the importance of those things that are put in place. So if your employer is encouraging you to take advantage of the thing, damn it, I got to quit saying take advantage, to use these things that are in place, then you should absolutely do it because they've designed it because they're interested in your long-term value, not just getting the most out of you they can in the short term.
So maybe I feel like we came to two kinds of thoughts or conclusions. One is that an unlimited policy is not for every company. I think that, sorry about the noise, a lot of startups may offer it as a awesome, and as an awesome benefit, but they're not structured yet to actually offer it in a comfortable way where people are comfortable to do so, because it's very demanding, it's very high pace, it's very, there's critical timelines. So it's very hard, and it gives it a bad name. It gives it like, oh, I was at a startup, they said unlimited, but I was never able to actually take any time off because they were always short on developers or whatever. And the other thing is that I think we're concluding on is that it takes a lot of commitment on the employer side to actually nurture a program like that and make sure that it's working for them as a company and for their employees as intended. So it works for everyone. I think when people talk about unlimited versus PTO, they kind of think of the employee only, and they say, oh, okay, well, in this case, I could just take it because it's mine. And in this case, it's such a challenge because I feel bad to even ask for it. But in reality, I think that to make either one work, it's the burden is on the employer, and I think that's the issue now, that most employers don't see it that way either. That they don't see that as a responsibility for either programs, to make it work well. So if you feel comfortable to take what you're owed, that doesn't work very well for the company either, because then you feel like, as an employer, like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Two people are just taking off at the same time. And the other way around, if the employer doesn't nurture it a certain way, then and make sure that the employee know and show by example that it's okay and everybody's happy when you go somewhere, and you know what I mean. I think that if that's not put in place, then that system doesn't work either. So in reality, there's no comparison between the two. A company, one, needs to pick the thing that's actually right for them in the structure that they have currently and where they are in the maturity of the company. And secondly, they have to own either one. They have to figure out how to best make it work for either one. So it's not really a comparison which one is better, it's just which one fits and what is the employer commitment into it. That's what I think.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect, a perfect lead in for next week, when we start to talk about like why people aren't taking time off, regardless of whatever the vacation policy is. Why aren't people taking time off, and why should employers insist people take time off? So I think it's a great lead in for there. And just from my perspective, kind of where I'm at, following this conversation is if you are going into an organization that does offer unlimited time off, and you kind of have these dreams of, wow, I'm going to be able to take off 3.5 weeks at a time, and I can, over the course of a year only work, 10 months. One, check back in with reality and actually just see what the culture is and see if it is an organization that truly supports you being able to take time off when you need it. Or is it one where it's just kind of like it's a little carrot that they're dangling out there?
Good chat.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was great to have Hila back on the call.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah.
Next time
we'll get her on the video feed, because it definitely does change the dynamic of the conversation. Plus, how amazing does my beard look on the video?
Right? Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I look forward to the follow-up conversation on this.
Yeah, and I included an infographic with the show notes, so take a look at that, because I think that'll give us some data. It gives us some data from last year, but it also gives us a good starting point.
Cool. Talk to you guys next time.
Yeah. Talk to you later. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to reach us, you could do so by emailing podcast@33sticks.com or on the web at www.33sticks.com. The 33 Tangents podcast is a production of 33 Sticks.